Hello, my name is Stephen Denman. My organisation is Shining Guidance. My website is shiningguidance.com. I'm going to talk to you today about autism, which is a subject that's becoming increasingly important across the world. Mental health issues in general are becoming increasingly given far more emphasis than they ever have done. People are concerned about their own mental health issues, and the Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD as it's known medically, is something that is all encompassing and is now shown to be covering different mental conditions such as Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, OCD, Aspergers syndrome, clinical depression, major depressive disorder, MDD, ADHD, and so on and so on and so on. So, the reason I want to do this talk on autism is because I feel it's far more pervasive and commonplace than is actually accepted. And I think there's too much stigma surrounding the concept of autism spectrum disorder, ASD. So therefore I thought I'd put this presentation together and go through my thoughts and share them with you and let you understand the subject in a much more dynamic and interesting way than probably it's been presented to you by other people. So I think what I'm going to start with is looking at the kind of defining aspects of autism. We know from the medical research that autism encompasses the difficulty of being able to express oneself in terms of using effective, timely, and correct types of communication in social settings. And that can include in the family setting and the home, social settings anywhere you can think of, from a supermarket to a high street to a bank to a government building and so on. Another aspect of what defines autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is having a consistent lack of eye contact and not using effective and correctly timed and appropriate types of non-verbal communication. That's obviously things to do with facial expressions and gestures and body language in the right settings on a social level. Another problem is incorrect or inappropriate types of intonation patterns, which is to do obviously with the tone of voice, where people who are autistic, and again, they're going to be completely unconscious to this because they're not aware of their own social awkwardness. It's just something that's innate within them, going back to their early childhood and many of the childhood based trauma imprints that they've got. So it can be that they're speaking too loudly, or individuals who've got autism are speaking too quietly in such a hush way. They're clearly revealing that they feel a deep lack of self-confidence, they've got low self-worth, and they feel quite frightened and anxious being in a social setting. Another form of the intonation pattern irregularities would include being able to convey themselves only in a monotone voice in any situation. So other people might be happy or stressed out. They could be feeling joyful and feeling harmonious, or angry and stressed and frustrated. And obviously the intonation pattern of those individuals naturally is going to be matching the words, the narratives, the dialogue that they're actually conveying to individuals around themselves. But with people who are autistic, that's not necessarily the case if they're speaking in monotone intonation patterns. Another aspect is the intensely ritualistic behavioural routines that people that are autistic use, which they do as a safeguarding mechanism because they feel so socially insecure, and it's a way of them narrowing down the parameters of their daily lifestyles 24/7, Monday to Sunday, day in, day out, week after week, month after month, year after year after year after year of their lives on planet Earth. So their sense of time is also quite different. So that's an interesting aspect. Autistic individuals tend to have, to some extent, a different perceptual understanding of time, of temporality, of being a physicalized incarnation in this 3D holographic reality of the material dimension. And these intensely ritualistic behavioral routines are ways of creating rigidity and immensely uniform control, because it's the only way they can deal with their own inner anxieties and trauma. So again, very interesting when we're looking at these aspects, and you see, for example, you have other things like they have self-harm issues or self-injury issues, which may include biting or scratching, hitting and slapping themselves. Now these are traumatic behavioural responses to more than likely very prolonged forms of verbal and psychological abuse that such autistic individuals, and as we know, 90% of people who are autistic, that's people on the autism spectrum disorder, ASD, are male, 10% are female. So it disproportionately obviously affects male autistic individuals over female autistic individuals. So they have been massively verbally and psychologically abused by maybe fathers or mothers, brothers and sisters, aunties, uncles, grandparents, or friends of the family, students, in the local college, or any number of individuals who have no empathy, love, or compassion for them and just want to abuse them because they get a delight in seeing them mentally suffer from the abuse they give them. Very, very nasty individuals that do such things as well, obviously. And so they then internalize the punisher, the verbal abuser, the psychological abuser, and they repeat that as an internal trauma on themselves. It's a negatively learned imprint, and again, it adds to the trauma. We know that really autism is centered on two main aspects, and that is there's a genetic hereditary aspect, and then you have the trauma-based aspect, which is imprints from early childhood and the adolescent years of that individual. And it's something that's so deeply traumatic that it has left such an ingrained imprint in their subconscious minds that it becomes an autonomic reaction in their daily lives, and they're just reliving subtly, second by second, minute by minute, this constant sense of trauma. And it's very, very sad to see. Another aspect to this, unfortunately, which is connected to, I guess, the trauma side of being autistic, is the tendency to socially isolate themselves. They deliberately choose to have a lack of friends. They don't want a lot of close friends, and they don't trust people. It's very difficult for autistic males and autistic females to form close emotional and sexual relationships. So you could have an autistic man who's in his 30s, 40s, or 50s, and he's single. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He's never been married. He doesn't know what it even know. He has no sense of knowing what it must be like to have a wife, and he's never going to have children. And it's a terrible thing because they're just trying to deal with their own inner mental condition, their own developmental disorder of being autistic. And being autistic is not a stigma. It's not something that makes you abnormal or weird or strange or unusual. It makes you special, unique, and quite absolutely incredible. We've got to remember that people who are autistic tend to be far more intelligent. I mean, the level of intelligence they have is just truly incredible. They have the ability to retain vast tracts of information, recall extremely intricate levels of information that most other human beings could find almost impossible to do. It's well known that people on the autism spectrum disorder kind of will, if you like, whether they are, have extreme forms of autism or they've got minor aspects of Aspergers, tend to have almost a photographic memory. They can remember incredible amounts of information in absolutely intricate detail going back to their early childhood, to the age of 5 or 6, 7 or 8 years old, when they were at primary school and then secondary school, and they'd be talking to, say, their father or mother or a brother or sister. And most of the time, their own close family relatives will say, I don't remember any of that. And they'll say to them, you seem to have an almost photographic memory. So, having autism spectrum disorder or ASD makes you unique. And you'll find that most people that are autistic go on, if they have enough self-confidence, that is, and they're made to feel self-worth by people who act as counsellors and mentors around them, who have true empathy, love, kindness, and compassion towards them, and want to safeguard them emotionally and psychologically to lead very successful lives and have very well-paid careers that are secure right up to the age of their retirement. And you just have to look at the disproportionately the amount of famous people on planet Earth that just reported in the mainstream media over the last sort of 50 to 60 years, let alone known historically over the last 150 to 200 years. And even going back into ancient history, going back to the time of classical Greece and Roman Italy, who have autistic traits. And you take a look at those people. They were philosophers, they were actors, they were actresses, and they are today, many of them. They're still alive, a lot of them. So you've got so many different individuals who have autistic spectrum disorder, ASD, who go on to lead very successful lives because they're able to find a conduit and specialize in their specific chosen field of academia, their specific career path, and they network with the right people and the right kinds of supervisors and managers around them who are facilitating their careers recognise what their skills bases are early on, and actually help to move them in the right direction and help them with mentoring and life coaching and so forth, which is a blessing. Really, it really is truly a blessing in disguise. I mean, I'll give you a few examples of individuals in history who have been autistic and are, those individuals who are today, autistic individuals who are very well known and very famous. So you have Socrates Sophroniscou, who is the Greek Athenian philosopher who founded Western philosophy. So, he was one of the main individuals that built the foundations of Western philosophy in classical Greece, and all the teachings from there. And Greek philosophy went into the Roman Empire, developed into Roman philosophy, and spread across Western Europe and Eastern Europe and so forth. You have an individual like the scientist, who is the English mathematician, physicist, astronomer, theologian, and alchemist. And he studied both Western alchemy and Eastern alchemy, and that was Isaac Newton. And he was intensely autistic. You have the German composer and pianist that many of you will have heard of, and that was Ludwig van Beethoven. He was very autistic. You have the English natural philosopher, who was known as Henry Cavendish. All of these individuals in their own way displayed autistic traits, were very heavily autistic in different ways, and they were actually quite socially isolated. They tended to like their own company over being, in social groups and so forth. You have other individuals like the Serbian genius inventor that many of you have heard of, Nikola Tesla. He was autistic. You have the very famous English novelist, essayist, journalist, and social critic, one of the most famous individuals in world history. His name is Eric Arthur Blair, better known as George Orwell. He wrote books like Animal Farm, 1984, and so forth. You have the Welsh actor, director and producer who has Aspergers syndrome, known as Philip Anthony Hopkins. He's better known as Anthony Hopkins. An incredible actor, fantastic character actor in Hollywood movies. And then you have, for example, an individual who is the American Cistercian monk and mystic who lived a life as a recluse in the United States of America, and his name was Thomas Merton. He was intensely autistic. But he was a truly profound individual with a lot of friends around him and support and people that admired his work. You have individuals like the very famous Swiss psychiatrist and psychotherapist that really is the founding father of Western and therefore modern psychoanalysis, and that was Carl Gustav Jung. Carl Gustav Jung was an absolutely incredible genius. The man is one of the greatest men who's ever lived. And then we have one of the greatest singers and songwriters in history from the United States of America, and that's the individual known as Robert Allen Zimmerman, better known as Bob Dylan. His lyrics are absolutely incredible in his songs. So you've got just a small number of examples here I wanted to give you of truly unique individuals, and the list of them just goes on and on. There's hundreds and hundreds of other individuals who are autistic, who in history have been famous dramatists and actors and actresses and musicians, playwrights and screenwriters and novelists. They've been scientists such as mathematicians, cosmologists, biologists, physiologists, archaeologists. The list just go on and on and on and on. So being autistic is something very beautiful and very special. It's not a stigma. It's not something to be castigated or looked down upon or judged or ridiculed in any negative way. Being autistic and therefore having Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, and that can include aspects of Obsessive Compulsive Disorder or OCD. It can include anything from clinical depression to major depressive disorder, MDD. In fact, many people who are autistic do suffer from clinical depression as a side effect from the fact that they are socially isolated. So one set of problems, which is the genetic hereditary aspect combined with the traumas from their early childhood and adolescent years, then helps to indirectly create more social isolation, which they use as a safeguarding mechanism to try and keep themselves, they believe, protected and safe and individuals around them by reducing lots of social human contact. But indirectly it creates a lot of isolation, misery and sadness, and it creates further behavioural dysfunctionality and deep unhappiness, disillusionment, and it keeps retouching on those aspects of rejection and abandonment. It's a horrible circle in that aspect and context of autism. It's a horrible thing to be dealing with. So yeah, it's not all Daffodils and Roses, it's also a subject where there's a huge amount of trauma and unhappiness in people who are autistic, but there's so much support out there. And I've known many individuals in my life who have various aspects of autism spectrum disorder or ASD, and those individuals I have reached out to on many occasions, and I've actually helped them. So I would say to them, try using the National Careers Service here in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Reach out to Prospects, which is an undergraduate website that does job searches, it does work placement training, it does data aggregation on finding the most ideal job roles. Different training providers are listed on there with their names of organizations listed, the addresses, phone number, email contacts. I say to them, what would you like to do? And many of these individuals have told me they'd like to specialize in languages at university. They really, it's very interesting that those individuals who are autistic, you really can see how they like to find very specialized subjects they want to study at undergraduate level, and probably go on to do a master's degree or even a PhD in very specialized fields of study. And then they would go on to contribute to Western society in an incredibly dynamic way. But a lot of the time, they have fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters and other relatives like aunties and uncles who don't give a damn about them and what they feel. They just see them as abnormal and weird and an outcast. It's an absolutely despicable and highly unacceptable form of behaviour. Verbal and psychological abuse of people who are autistic is absolutely sickening. If you watch the movie Rain Man with Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise, it's one of the greatest movies made, in my opinion, about autism. You see the character that Dustin Hoffman plays, incredible acting role that he portrayed on camera. And it's so emotionally moving, but you can see when you watch him on camera the intense trauma that he's conveying in that character role in the movie Rain Man. He's so traumatized, and he has such intensely rigid self-control mechanisms because anything outside those parameters is terrifying and traumatic for him as an individual in the modern world. And you see in the movie Rain Man, Dustin Hoffman playing an autistic man, who really is a boy in a man's body. He's still in a state of almost arrested development from his childhood, because that's the key area where the trauma really was activated and was imprinted. You also realise that it's probably going to be genetic and hereditary, which is kind of conveyed in the various aspects of that character role that Dustin Hoffman played in the movie Rain Man. And you see how caring and kind Tom Cruise is towards him. In that brotherly role, he really reaches out. He's very protective. He's the safeguarder of his brother. He can sense those intense vulnerabilities. And the vulnerabilities of autistic people aren't really known until they're out in a social setting. And where things are rapidly changing in social settings, so like at a busy railway station, for example, any busy transport interchange here in the United Kingdom of Great Britain, maybe in somewhere like London or Birmingham or Manchester or Newcastle, can overwhelm autistic individuals, even those with aspects of Aspergers that actually lead relatively normal lives, that don't display the other symptoms, that actually find it easier to socially integrate, that also may have very effective communication skills. Like the actor Anthony Hopkins, he's got Asperger's syndrome, but he has fantastic communication skills. When he's revising for a part, he has to revise all the lines and the acts and scenes of every movie or TV program that he's going to be in, and he's got to go in front of that camera with the director and producer on the set, and he has to act out that part in a convincing, cohesive and uniform manner that is timely and effective. Now, somebody that is severely autistic and was severely autistic from that perspective would never be able to do that. It would be too stressful for them. They cannot even cope for even 5 minutes being in a large group of other people, especially like a film crew on a film or television set. That is too much for them. So that it's not like it's one thing or another, it's various gradients. The Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD, is various gradients, and it affects different individuals in different ways. But yes, there is a kind of set of key and centralized aspects to it that are defining. And when you come across individuals, mainly will be obviously those individuals that are male, as 90% of those individuals with autism are male and 10% are female. You should be able to recognize that and show empathy and compassion and kindness towards them, because they're unique people. They have incredible amounts of intelligence and the aptitude to do very well in life if they're given the right level of guidance, protection, mentoring and coaching to do so. I'm bringing this talk to an end. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed presenting the information. There'll be many more talks to come in the near future. So I'm just going to say no, thanks for watching, and I'm saying no, take care and goodbye.